This is the third question I got in my ByteDance interview, and it is in the second round of interview. My first and second round of interview is back to back, so I have about 5 to 10 minutes of rest time. This question isn't necessarily hard, it's more of annoying than hard. Annoying in the sense that there are a lot of edge cases. So you are given an array of strings and an integer called maximum width. You're supposed to split this array of strings into multiple lines, and each lines can have at most max width number of characters. If we look at this array of strings, first thing you notice is it's not obvious how many lines there will be. But we do know that if our current line overflow, we shouldn't select the last word that caused our current line to overflow. We will just push that word to the next line. But then once we figure out what are the words that should fit into the current line, we should distribute space evenly among them. So for the first line, this is n, occupies a certain number of spaces. The actual space that it occupies is 4 plus 2 plus 2. So that will be 8. Now you still have another 8 spaces left because 16 minus 8 equals to 8. So you distribute the 8 remaining spaces evenly amongst, let's call it gaps. So your number of gaps is actually the number of words minus 1, right? Now in this case, you have 8 spaces and 2 gaps, so 4, 4. But for this line, you have 2 gaps, but the number of spaces is 2 and 1. So you will have uneven distribution of spaces among the gaps. As for the very last line, it will be left justified. For example, this one shall be. If this line is not the last line, this B should be at the end, right? But because it is the very last line, it will be left justified. Now, no matter what line it is, any remaining spaces is supposed to be padded until the max width, right? This is supposed to be padded. Let's suppose you are given an input string that's ABC, I am, acknowledgement shall be. And the max width is 16. And we're supposed to generate an array of strings or array of lines. So let's look at the very first line. We know some words should come to the first line, but we don't know what they are. There is guarantee that every input word can fit inside max width, meaning every string inside our input, the length is less than or equal to max width. Each word can have at most length of 16. If the length is 16, there will be no space that we need to pad. So let's look at the first line. Now we have A. It's useful to keep track of some variables. For example, length with space and length without space. I will explain the differences between these two variables, but as of right now, the length of our first line with space and without space is the same, which is 1. So let's keep going. We have B. In order to put B in our current line, we need to add a space, right? So I'm just going to use underscore to demonstrate a space. If we count the current length with space, our length with space, well, let me just call it length S. The other one, let me just call it length. So our length S is 3, right? Because A space B, so it is 3. Now our length without space is just 2, right? It's just AB. Because 3 is less than 16, so we can keep going. Now let's check, can we accommodate C also? If we accommodate C, it's going to put 2 new characters, which is fine, right? So our length S, length with space is going to be 5. Our length without space is going to be 3. Okay, so let's keep going. If we have I, that's going to make our length with space is 7. Without space is 4. If we have M, we're going to add 3 more, so we have 10. Length without space, we're going to have 6, right? Because 4 plus 2 is 6. Then we have acknowledgement. I happen to know that acknowledgement length is 15, so we need to add one space plus 15, so we need to add 16. So we will have 10 plus 16, which is 26. 26 is greater than 16, so we know that acknowledgement cannot fit into the current line, so our current line can only fit until M. But here's the problem. This should not be our final output, right? We're supposed to distribute the space evenly. And how many spaces in total do we need to distribute amongst these 5 words? It is total space, which is 16, minus length, which is 6, equals to 10, right? So this is max width minus length. It is length, not length width space. So 10 is the number of available spaces. We should distribute these 10 amongst 5 words, aka 4 gaps, right? 5 words, so 4 gaps. So 10 over 4, we get 2, and a remainder of 2. So we can call this quotient. We can call this remainder. Now, what is the significance of quotient and remainder? Quotient just means the minimum amount of padding that we should have in between each gap, right? So if you have A, B, C, A, I, A, M, we should have minimum 2, minimum 2, minimum 2, minimum 2, which is dictated by quotient. Now, remainder just means from left to right, we should have 2 gaps that we should pad 1 more. So we have 2 remainder. So for the first gap and the second gap, we should pad 1 more. So our padding becomes 3, 3, 2, 2. And why we don't want to pad here and here again? Because our remainder is only 2. Here we consume a remainder. Here we consume a remainder. We run out of remainder, so we don't need to pad anymore. So our very first line will be A, 3 spaces, B, 3 spaces, C, 2 spaces, I, 2 spaces, M. So let's look at the second line. Second line, we have acknowledgement. For the second line, our length S will be 15. Our length is also 15. So let's keep going. The next word is shall. The length of shall is 5. So if you want to accommodate shall, the length with space will be 15 plus 1 plus 5. That's definitely more than 16, so we know shall belongs to the next line, not the current line. Because there's only one word, so there's no gap per se, so we just fill up whatever space left. In this case, we only have 1 space left. If this word is length of 14, for example, let's truncate the T, we will need to pad another space. Let's keep going. The third line, the first word is shall. Our length with space and length without space is the same, both are 5. The next word is B. Can we accommodate B into our current line? Yes, because 5 plus 1 plus 2, which is 8, is less than 16. So you add a space, add the word B, length with space will be 8, length without space will be 7. Now, because this is the last line, so our previous rule of evenly distributing spaces will not apply. Instead of justifying, we will instead do a left justify. By a left justify, it just means pad whatever white space that is left. So our current length with space is 8, so we just pad the current line with 8 spaces. Now, if shall be is not the last line, for example, we still have another word that comes after shall be, which is too big to fit into the current line. Let's say we have another acknowledgement that is right after shall be, right? Let's assume that. Then we need to do the same old logic, which is find out what's the number of spaces that we need to distribute. That will be 16 minus 7, which is 9. And 9 needs to distribute in between 2 words, which is 1 gap. So 9 by 1 equals to 9. So we pad 9 spaces. So this will be shall 9 spaces B. This is the case when our shall be is not the last line. So let us write the actual code. Let's initialize what we are supposed to return as res. It is an array of strings. And we will iterate over the input array of strings. Within each loop is one line. Because it's not obvious how many words fit into one line, that's why right here I didn't do I++. We're going to do that within an inner for loop. So for the inner while loop, I'm going to use j to advance. I will keep advancing j as long as my current line can keep fitting in more words. So we can initialize another two variable, length with s and length without s. Because we have a guarantee that each word length is guaranteed to be greater than 0 and not exceed maximum width, so we know the first word of each new line is always valid. So we can just initialize length s as the first word of the current line. And length without space is the same. And in order to keep advancing, we need to make sure that by choosing the next word, it's not going to overflow. So here you need to do like a try. If the try fails, you're not going to commit. If only the try succeed, you commit. So what we're going to try here is length s plus 1 plus the next word, which is, we can do a pre-increment plus j. So as of right now, j is already the next word. So word j dot length. So current length with space plus a white space and the next word is not going to overflow. Not overflow means less than or equals to max width. And here we commit when not overflow. So we commit by length s plus equals to 1 plus words j dot length without space plus equals to words j dot length. J, as we keep advancing through, will fail at some point. So that j is the upper bound, exclusive upper bound. So the total number of words we have is going to be j minus I. Now the gap will be the number of words minus 1, which will be j minus I minus 1. And the total number of space that we have is going to be the max width minus length. We can initialize a current line as a string. We can pretty much initialize as the very first word. And after we do some logic, we will push this line onto the result string, the result array. Now here we are gonna calculate the quotient and the remainder. During the interview, I use space and mod because I feel that's lesser typing. So I'm just gonna use base and mod. Now, base is going to be the total number of space that you need to distribute over gap. Mod is just space mod gap. And here's a problem, a potential problem is, what if your gap is 0, right? Because if there's only one word, number of gaps is 0, so you cannot divide by 0. So let's handle that. Let's do if gap is greater than 0, now the base string is going to be string base, so this base number of empty spaces. And we should let I catch up to j, right? Because I is the start of our current line and I never change, we only advance j. We should let I to catch up to J to add the word to our current line. As of right now, our current line is only I. So we can pre-increment I and let it catch up to J and push the word onto the line. So the word is going to be the padding first. So the padding consists of base string plus, and here we can do, if we still have mod, if we still have remainder, we're going to pad a space, else we don't pad. And of course mod, we need to consume a mod, then we plus the word. Now after we have padded the gap in between, we should handle the cases like this. So when you are at the last line, you should left justify and pad the end with whatever space left. So you should pad with whatever space left. So this is your current string's length. Just pad, just calculate what is left. So you can just do res line plus equals to string max width minus line dot length. Oh, I don't know what I pressed. And in the end, let's do I equals to j. There are cases where I will not catch up to j. That's when, if this condition is not fulfilled, this while loop will not run, then your I will not catch up to j. So let's see if it works. Oh, this is in place line. Push the current string into the result array. Let's submit. Okay, so this is another edge case because our last line we should only left justify. So our rule of calculating base and mod shouldn't apply. So we can just check if j is the end. The end is words dot length. Then we just pad with 1. Here the mod, we can do the same thing. If j equals a word dot length, we pad with 0. Let's see if this works. What's the size? And submit. So there you go. As I said earlier, this question is not necessarily hard, it's just annoying, and you may be graded on how clean your code is. Like my code right now is still not clean, but I think will do in an interview situation.